In a quiet town where the days all seemed the same, the destinies of two people were about to intertwine. The elder demonstrated his powers publicly, not out of kindness, but because he had his own selfish motives. All that man wanted was to attract loyal followers who would venerate him and serve his purposes. The young protagonist, however, had a different ambition. He endured the difficult coexistence only because he desperately needed knowledge. It was a relationship of convenience. While the old man imposed his authority, the boy remained there, observing and awaiting his chance. He knew that this was the only way. His determination was unwavering, no matter how arduous the process. Thus, the nights around the campfire became lessons. The master explained the fundamentals of magic, and the student absorbed every detail. The boy internalized the teachings, silently preparing for the future he longed for. Time passed, bringing with it the harshness of winter and covering the world in silence. The seasons continued their cycle, and as the years passed, the seed of learning began to germinate. The day came to put theory to the test. Under the master's supervision, the young man concentrated all his spiritual energy. The effort required total concentration. He felt the power flow, struggling to keep it under control. The old man, who watched skeptically, suddenly realized something extraordinary. This was not the talent of an ordinary child. The boy's energy shifted dramatically, revealing an intensity that surpassed all expectations. With a decisive movement, he released the spell. Raw power manifested, proving that the training had created something formidable. The spell hit the target with lethal precision, proving that the fundamentals had been absorbed. The elder watched his pupil's progress with satisfaction. The young protagonist, in turn, remained focused, controlling the residual energy. However, time took its toll. The master felt the weight of age advancing, bringing with it a weariness that magic could not cure. The apprentice, on the other hand, displayed tireless determination. He endured physical exhaustion, driven only by his own ambition. The seasons passed, and the routine of the camp became the only world they knew as night fell. Amidst his drunkenness, the old man commented on the approaching coming-of-age ceremony, laughing awkwardly. The young man just listened, chewing his bread in silence. He was already used to his mentor's drunken ramblings. For the protagonist, this was just another moment to be tolerated. He absorbed what was useful and ignored the rest. Until sudden silence replaced the slurred words, the boy lowered his gaze, realizing that something had changed irrevocably. The rain began to fall on the inert body. The elder had departed, leaving the boy facing the raw reality of death. The young man stared at the void left by his master. There was no despair on his face, only the understanding that an era had ended. One last duty remained to be fulfilled. He plunged the shovel into the soaked earth, beginning the laborious and solitary work. Without help, the protagonist dragged the body to its final rest. The physical weight was the only thing he allowed to manifest. The burial was simple, marked only by a makeshift cross. He remained there for a moment, paying silent homage. The boy closed his eyes, allowing the rain to wash away the past. Now, he was truly alone to walk his own path. The young man accepted the immutability of his decision. Under the cold rain, he understood that there was no turning back and that his destiny was sealed by the choices he had just made. Time flowed mercilessly. 4 years had passed since the death of his former master, transforming the landscape in the boy's life. During this period, fate placed a new figure of authority in his path. A woman who exuded confidence and leadership crossed the protagonist's path. She operated under a distinct banner, a symbol of strength that would soon dictate the boy's days and battles. The young man joined the Belden Mercenary Corps. Under the tutelage of that commander, he left his childhood behind, becoming a disciplined warrior alongside her. The relationship between them transcended the battlefield. The woman also assumed the role of educator, sharing knowledge and shaping the boy's mind in moments of calm. The base of operations, known as Belden's Tier, became the refuge where he honed his skills away from the eyes of the world. One afternoon, the commander decided to address a delicate matter. She openly acknowledged the exceptional talent that Derrick possessed, validating the potential he hid. Her expression became serious. It wasn't just a compliment. She was about to guide him through an exercise that would require absolute control. Derrick remained attentive and silent. He knew that her words carried a weight that could alter his understanding of his own strength. The instruction was clear and direct. The mentor ordered him to close his eyes and try to feel the flow of his mana, connecting with his inner self. The boy obeyed, concentrating deeply. He tried to visualize what he was asked, striving to manipulate the latent energy in his body. However, something went wrong. The mana reacted violently and unexpectedly, throwing Derrick backward as an unstable aura erupted from him. The commander realized the danger too late. Her calm expression crumbled as she noticed the volatility of the power the boy had awakened. The energy went completely out of control, exploding in a flash that shook the building's structure, while the mentor screamed amidst the sudden chaos. The sudden bang startled everyone at the base. The mercenaries, alarmed, immediately turned their attention to the source of the disturbing noise. Derrick stared at his own hands, still trembling from the shock. The raw energy he had just released was far beyond what he intended to control. Before the boy could process what had happened, he felt a firm and urgent grip on his wrist. The commander dragged him out of the room without saying a word. She knew they needed to leave before the others arrived and asked questions. Outside, confusion was spreading rapidly. Armed guards were scouring the courtyard, trying to locate the source of the mysterious explosion. The woman guided the young man through the back alleys, sneaking away from the commotion without being noticed by the other members of the group. As soon as they were far enough away from the immediate danger and prying eyes, she finally stopped. The leader of the mercenaries stopped, but her silence weighed more than any scream. Derrick awaited the reprimand with a racing heart. He feared that this disastrous mistake would cost him his place there and his safety. However, the commander did not explode in anger. She just watched him with a complex mixture of concern and strategic calculation. She approached, imposing her presence. The veteran needed the boy to understand the gravity of the unstable power he carried within him. Her gaze was stern but not of rejection. There was a hard lesson to be passed at that moment about responsibility and control. The young man listened in silence, realizing that, against all his pessimistic expectations, he would not be expelled. From that day on, the dynamic between them changed. She began to instruct him personally, alternating between the secrets of magic and the mundane discipline of the sword. The commander definitely took him under her wing. Wherever the work took her, Derrick followed, absorbing every teaching about that new world. The Elvster house carried a heavy legacy, the kind of family whose reputation shaped destinies even before birth. Derrick remembered the looks he received in childhood, always loaded with silent expectations and veiled judgments. Those memories, however, seemed distant now, like echoes of a farewell that no longer caused him pain. Back in reality, the young man prepared to leave, holding the grimoire that had defined his last years of study. However, he decided to leave that chapter behind, abandoning the book in the room as he walked towards the exit. The protagonist felt renewed, with his gaze focused and determined to forge his own path from then on. His journey took him to a well-known inn in the region, a strategic point for his new goals. Upon entering, the boy sat down in front of the counter, awaiting the attention of the establishment's owner. The man greeted him with a businesslike smile, assessing the potential of this new customer. Derrick, however, kept a closed expression, indicating that he was not there for small talk. The innkeeper soon dropped the subtlety, extolling the importance of money above any other priority at that moment. The man's greed made him advance, grabbing the boy's clothes to emphasize his demand for immediate payment. With coldness, the young mage pushed the man's hand away, refusing to be intimidated by such rudeness. In response, he calmly placed a coin on the wood, testing the other's reaction. Derrick knew that this amount, although small, would be enough to start the negotiation he really wanted. The innkeeper continued to shout at the boy's back, outraged. As Derrick reached the door, the man yelled one last complaint about the absurd demands he received. Something in those words made the young man stop. He looked back, realizing that the situation might be more advantageous than it initially seemed. The owner explained his frustration while yelling. There were customers specifically requesting a mage, an impossible demand for that establishment to meet. He questioned the boy's audacity in interfering. For the innkeeper, Derrick was nothing more than a nuisance who should know his place. Ignoring the contempt, the protagonist raised his hand firmly. He decided to intervene before leaving. The innkeeper's anger suddenly shifted into calculating interest. He realized that perhaps he could profit from the boy's audacity. Derrick contemplated the object in his hand. It wasn't just payment, but the key to negotiating his stay and his worth. The door swung open, revealing the source of the commotion. A gentleman of distinguished appearance entered, bringing with him an aura of authority and impatience. Close behind, a lady and a hooded figure accompanied him. The atmosphere around them was heavy, laden with a silent urgency. The innkeeper's demeanor changed instantly. He began an exaggerated reception, trying to please the nobles while seeking to present the boy as a commodity. The newcomer, however, remained skeptical. He confronted the owner about what he'd heard, demanding confirmation about the mentioned skills. The innkeeper panicked, breaking out in a cold sweat. He tried to backpedal and explain that he couldn't guarantee the child's competence. The group of nobles turned their attention to Derrick with distrust. The idea of entrusting an important task to someone so young seemed ridiculous to them. The gentleman sought the silent advice of his wife. Doubt lingered between them about risking everything in the hands of a stranger. However, the visible weariness on the woman suggested that their options were dwindling. The family's desperation began to overcome their prejudice. The young protagonist recalled the events that brought him to this moment, remembering his battles in the lands of Duplan. The memory took him back to the vast open landscapes, where the wilderness concealed constant dangers. The attack came without warning. The creature was violently thrown back, struck by the mage's immediate defensive reaction. There was no time for hesitation. The boy advanced with lethality, determined to eliminate the threat before it recovered. The enemy, however, refused to fall without a fight, brandishing its weapon in a desperate downward strike. The resistance was futile. The protagonist stood tall, coldly observing the opponent he had just subdued. He didn't stop there. Unleashing his mana, the young man summoned electrical discharges that decimated the rest of the pack in moments. With the massacre concluded, he turned to receive the recognition of his superiors, fulfilling his duty as an officer. That display of power attracted influential gazes. The group of nobles watched with interest, assessing whether he would be useful for their purposes. The figure hidden under the hood seemed especially intrigued, concealing a smile of satisfaction in the shadows. Back in the present, the calm of the Belden's Tier Inn was about to be shattered. The mercenary commander perceived the injustice occurring there, and her patience instantly ran out. She exploded in fury, confronting the greedy innkeeper without caring who witnessed the scene. Grabbing the man by the collar, the woman demanded to know the truth about the payments he was trying to hide from the boy. She pressured the cowardly owner, refusing to release him until he confessed the exact amount that had been withheld. The innkeeper stipulated an absurd price for the stay. The mercenary, indignant, refused to accept that blatant extortion. The man, however, kept his arrogance intact. He knew he had the upper hand in the negotiation and reveled in the other's despair. The girl completely lost her composure. She shouted furiously, refusing to be cheated in that way. But the owner's patience quickly ran out. He imposed his authority with shouts, demanding immediate silence and submission. The outburst of anger, however, drained her energy. Overcome by fatigue or drink, the young woman ended up fainting onto the table. With the girl out of action, the man turned to the young man. He began to brag about trivial battles, trying to command respect. The protagonist remained impassive. Those stories of bravado did not cause him any admiration or fear. While the innkeeper gestured and talked nonstop, the boy just drank, deliberately ignoring the attempt at intimidation. However, amidst the chatter, something sparked a memory in him. His mind disconnected from the present for an instant. He recalled the moment when he received an object of great importance, a responsibility that had been entrusted to him in the past. The memory of that day brought a grave expression to his face. The weight of duty still accompanied him, silently. His eyes reflected a sudden clarity. He realized how that ancient moment connected with his current journey. The innkeeper, oblivious to the boy's thoughts, assumed a more rigid posture. He expected a response, not indifference. The young man returned to reality. The memory dissipated, leaving only the coldness needed to deal with the problem ahead. The owner remained at his back, waiting. A silent and heavy tension filled the atmosphere between the two. With the massacre concluded, the mercenary assured the group that the monster threat had been neutralized and safety was restored. The warrior seemed pleased with his own performance, but the distinguished gentleman maintained an analytical stance, silently assessing the outcome of the combat. The reward for services rendered was paid immediately. Gold changed hands, sealing the initial agreement for protection. In good spirits, the man laughed and ruffled the young protagonist's hair, treating him like an inexperienced child, oblivious to the boy's annoyance. The informal celebration, however, was interrupted. A discreet yet demanding clearing of the throat cut through the relaxed moment. The nobleman regained his composure and prepared to speak. There was something more serious to negotiate than just eliminating minor creatures. The mercenary ceased his playfulness, though he kept his hand on the boy, curiously awaiting the aristocrat's proposal. The gentleman got straight to the point. He offered a considerable sum in gold to hire continued escort to the duchy's lands. His stern expression made it clear that he would not accept refusals and expected absolute competence in exchange for payment. The young protagonist processed the information in silence. The mentioned destination sparked his interest, making him seriously consider the proposal. The agreement was accepted. Shortly after, the carriage continued its course along the road, taking the group towards civilization. The journey ended before an imposing estate. The scale of the architecture revealed the true influence and wealth of that family. Upon disembarking in the courtyard, the youth examined the surroundings. He walked cautiously, analyzing every detail of the unfamiliar territory. His companion, on the other hand, seemed entirely at ease, displaying a confident smile before the opulence of the place. The nobleman turned to give final instructions. While the warrior showed servile enthusiasm, the boy merely watched, keeping his own thoughts. The estate's butler received the newcomers with silent scrutiny, assessing every detail of their posture to judge if they were worthy to be there. While the mercenary felt the weight of that oppressive formality and broke out in a cold sweat, the young protagonist remained completely indifferent to the social tension of the environment. Only the housekeeper offered a different reception, trying to soften the rigid atmosphere with a gentle and welcoming demeanor. The imposing presence of the noble house's servants left the mercenary visibly out of place, unsure how to behave in the face of such etiquette. Suddenly, something caught the youth's attention, diverting his focus from the trivialities of that ceremonious reception. The mercenary noticed the boy's sudden change in attitude, realizing that he had detected something that the others were ignoring. Ignoring the welcoming etiquette, the protagonist turned to investigate the source of his curiosity. His instincts were sharp. He knew exactly where to look and what he sought to find in that unfamiliar place. And there she was. A luminous presence who watched the group's arrival with particular interest, as if she already expected them. The youth held the gaze, silently confirming that his stay in that mansion would bring inevitable encounters. The grandeur of the estate, however, hid internal conflicts that seethed behind its stone walls. Far from there, the tranquility of the corridors was shattered when the doors of the main office were violently thrown open. The nobleman, who until then had been quietly tending to his affairs, had his attention urgently requested. Valerian stormed into the room furious, confronting his father and demanding that he stop ignoring the presence of the outsider he considered a threat. The patriarch, however, maintained his icy composure in the face of his son's emotional outburst, listening to the complaint with unwavering calm. Valerian stood between his father and the maid, unable to tolerate that cruelty for another second, demanding an immediate end to the punishment. The girl trembled on the floor, her spirit completely broken by the ruthless treatment she received in that house. The scene drew a silent gaze from someone who merely watched the family conflict with cold attention, without intervening. The youth continued his heated defense, arguing that the maid's mistakes did not justify such disproportionate hostility. The patriarch, however, remained motionless behind his desk, listening to his son's screams with icy indifference. The tension in the room became palpable, with the family's hierarchy being openly challenged before witnesses. The observing figure remained distant, only calculating the consequences of that reckless insubordination. Valerian felt that his words were hitting a wall, but the accumulated frustration only impelled him to continue the confrontation. He recalled the genuine kindness that existed in the past, a memory that made the injustice of the present even more bitter. That memory hardened his determination, making him hold the defiant gaze against the supreme authority of the house. The father finally reacted to the taunts, removing his glasses with a slow calm that foreshadowed violence. The boy realized too late the drastic change in the atmosphere, freezing before the imminent danger. Without any warning, the older man lunged forward, grabbing his son by the skull with crushing, humiliating force. He imposed his physical will on the young man, forcing him down to demonstrate who held the true, absolute control there. Valerian was forced into total submission, tasting blood in his mouth as his rebellion was brutally stifled. The lord of the house watched the newcomer's approach with an expression of calculated severity. The protagonist and his companion walked together, maintaining dignity despite the pressure emanating from the environment. They stopped, awaiting the right moment to be properly announced or received. She, however, felt the weight of the memories of that place, lowering her gaze for a brief moment of vulnerability. The heavy office doors finally opened, granting them access to the interior. Upon entering, they found other nobles who seemed to be in the middle of an uncomfortable situation. The uniformed man offered a polite smile, trying to soften the tense atmosphere of the room. The lady responded to the kindness with a slight smile, showing relief at seeing a friendly face. While formalities were exchanged, the nervousness of one of those present contrasted with the forced relaxation of the other. The young protagonist, however, narrowed his eyes, realizing that the cordiality was just a facade. He analyzed the arrogant posture of the noble before him, ignoring the attempt at social staging. Anger began to simmer silently within him as he noticed the details that no one else seemed to see. His attention shifted to a maid crying in the background, a recent victim of the temperament of that house. The boy stored that image in his memory, confirming the contempt he felt for the attitudes there. With everyone settled, the patriarch began the formal conversation, questioning their performance in Ebelstein. The young noblewoman displayed a polite smile upon entering, but the protagonist remained vigilant in her shadow. The patriarch was already awaiting them, analyzing the newcomers with a cold and silent judgment. While she performed the formal greeting, the boy bowed respectfully, following protocol. However, the reception was interrupted. The lord abruptly ordered the young man to stay away. The sudden command made the protagonist hesitate, quickly calculating the reason for that demand. The atmosphere in the room became heavy, isolating them from the outside world as silence prevailed. Ignoring their presence, the man turned his attention back to the paperwork, asserting his dominance through disinterest. His authority filled the room, making it clear that he would dictate the pace of that meeting. The young man obeyed and sat down, waiting patiently while observing the surroundings. The patriarch maintained the silence purposefully, creating an invisible barrier between his desk and the visitor. Finally, he interrupted his work, removing his glasses with a slow and deliberate gesture. The look he gave the boy was piercing, searching for any sign of weakness or hesitation. However, the protagonist did not look away, facing the challenge with an unwavering serenity. Faced with that audacity, the lord decided to raise the stakes, unleashing his aura to crush the boy's resistance. He awaited the reaction, curious to see how far that young man could withstand the pressure. The patriarch adjusted his glasses, coldly analyzing the visitor. He seemed to be looking for any sign of weakness or hesitation in the other's posture. The young man, however, remained calm. A slight smile appeared on his lips, showing that the pressure of that authority did not affect him. The noble continued his silent judgment. He was not used to being stared at with such indifference by someone so young. The conversation continued in a charged atmosphere. The boy sat before the figure of power, aware that his every word was being weighed. The older man frowned, dissatisfied. Something about the boy's attitude bothered him deeply, defying his expectations. The protagonist just watched. He knew that silence was sometimes a more effective weapon than any verbal argument. The Lord then resumed speaking firmly. He tried to impose his will, making it clear who dictated the rules in that office. His expression hardened even more. Arrogance shone through every gesture, revealing the contempt he felt for the situation. The young man caught the veiled hostility. His eyes focused intently on the speaker, reading the intentions behind that rigid facade. The patriarch held his gaze, defiant. The tension in the room reached its peak, about to overflow into open conflict. Suddenly, the focus of the meeting was diverted. Someone's motor control failed, and an object slipped towards the floor. The sound of breaking porcelain interrupted the discussion. The maid responsible for the mistake froze, aware of the disaster she had just caused. She bowed desperately in apology. The fear of retaliation was evident in her submissive posture before her superior. Panic was plastered on the girl's face. Cold sweat dripped as she awaited punishment for her lack of dexterity. The incident left a heavy silence in the air. The subsequent quiet was as disturbing as the noise of the accident. The man firmly imposed his conditions on the territory of Duplan. He made it clear that there was no room for negotiation at that moment. The woman lowered her guard, accepting the situation with resigned silence. She knew that contesting would be futile before that authority. Pleased with her submission, the nobleman allowed himself a confident smile. Everything was going exactly as he had planned. She responded with a restrained smile, maintaining the composure required by etiquette, although her inner feelings were quite different. The lady tried to argue briefly, seeking a loophole in those rigid orders, but kept her tone cautious. The man's expression hardened immediately. He reinforced his demands, unwilling to tolerate questions about his leadership. Faced with his intransigence, she just listened attentively, absorbing the gravity of the warning without looking away. Meanwhile, in the mansion's corridors, the young protagonist walked determinedly, escorted by servants who kept a respectful distance. He stopped in front of the main entrance, aware that the meeting inside was already underway, and his presence was awaited. Calmly, the young man raised his hand, preparing to interrupt the noble's private dialogue. His knocks on the door were firm and rhythmic, announcing his arrival with confidence, without apologizing for the timing. The young man waited briefly, his mind focused and alert for any sign of hostility that might come from the other side. Sensing it was the right moment, he turned the doorknob, determined to face whatever was happening inside. The door opened and he entered the room, bringing with him a serious aura that instantly changed the atmosphere of the place. The protagonist spotted the woman sitting in the back and quickly assessed the tension in the room before taking another step. The young woman waited by the window, aware that her little fun was about to begin. She had no intention of making life easy for the newcomer. The protagonist entered the room with firm steps, completely oblivious to the childish trap that had been prepared specifically for his reception. A wicked smile curved the girl's lips. The moment she had been waiting for had arrived, and the anticipation of chaos amused her deeply. Suddenly, a wave of cold water hit him squarely. The impact was sudden, designed to cause maximum humiliation and discomfort right at the entrance. The young man just closed his eyes, feeling the icy liquid soak his. The young man just closed his eyes, feeling the icy liquid soak his continuation. The young man just closed his eyes, feeling the icy liquid soak his continuation. Continuation. The young man just closed his eyes, feeling the icy liquid soak his continuation. 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 The young man just closed his eyes, feeling the icy liquid soak his continuation. 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 The young man just closed his eyes, feeling the icy liquid soak his continuation. 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 The young man just closed his eyes, feeling the icy liquid soak his continuation. 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 The young man just closed his eyes, feeling the icy liquid soak his continuation. 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 The young man just closed his eyes, feeling the icy liquid soak his continuation. 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 The young man just closed his eyes, feeling the icy liquid soak his continuation. 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 The young man just closed his eyes, feeling the icy liquid soak his continuation. 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 The young girl watched the result of her mischief with an air of triumph, expecting an explosive reaction. The protagonist, however, remained kneeling and silent, absorbing the momentary humiliation. Not satisfied with just the cold shower, the girl decided to raise the level of provocation. She could barely contain her laughter as she took off her shoe, openly mocking his passivity. The boy looked up, his patience being tested to the limit by the childish arrogance that emanated from her. With absolute disdain, she extended her bare foot towards his face, demanding an act of total submission. Meanwhile, in the main office of the mansion, the atmosphere was solemn and heavy with bureaucracy. The lord of the house remained by the window, his back to the room, lost in troubling thoughts. He turned slowly, revealing a serious face, marked by the weight of dealing with delicate family matters. The nobleman sat down before the protagonist and explained gravely that Lady Diella's problem would not be easily solved. The young mage listened attentively, understanding that the girl's hostility was just a symptom of something bigger. Her father kept his gaze steady, seeking in the mercenary the necessary competence to deal with the impossible situation. Minutes before, however, the boy's response to the insult had been physical. Instead of kissing her foot, he knocked her to the ground without hesitation. Diella touched her face, stunned and blushing. For the first time in her life, someone had dared to fight back. The protagonist stared down at her, adjusting his glove coldly, demonstrating that he would not tolerate disrespect from a child. His gaze darkened with a threatening intensity, making it clear to the young noble that he was dangerous.